Welcome to the continued podcast adventures of three opinionated guys with mics and too much free time. Strong enough to stop a speeding movie rumor, more powerful than a bad comic book event, able to waste hours of time asking stupid questions to people who have better things to do. It's Dave, Ben, and John. It's Superhero Speak.
Hey everyone, you're listening to Superhero Speak, and I'm your host Dave.
And I'm JD.
And JD, we don't have John this week.
No, but I had to bring someone in as a fill-in at the last second, so hopefully that plays out.
Cool, who'd you bring?
I got my buddy Paul Allor here right now. We've been friends for probably about 6 or 7 years. He's a really good comic book writer. He's a friend. He actually edited my first book, Deluge, and he's got a really cool book coming out from Aftershock. And Paul, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, my friend?
Hi, my name is Paul. I edited JD's first book, Deluge. I have a really cool new book coming out from Aftershock.
Yes, but I heard a rumor that you also worked on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, I've been doing various Turtle stuff for about 4 or 5 years now. I've done a few different minis, and most recently I did the first arc of TMNT Universe, and I have a one-shot of TMNT Universe coming out in January with artist Tyler Boss. So a few other odds and ends here and there.
Cool. So, same basic question we always kind of start on with these things is working in comics and editing and writing something you always wanted to do?
No. I actually did not start reading comics until I was 28. So wow. I came around to it pretty late in life, yeah. And let me back up, because I gave kind of a jackassy answer there. Just to say that the book that I have coming out this December is from Aftershock, like I said. It's called Monstro Mechanica. It's really fantastic. I'm working with a Dutch art team, Chris Evenhuis, my co-creator, who is doing the line work, and Sean Bayers is doing the coloring for us. And I probably butchered both of their names. Sorry, guys. I'll try to get better at that. But I hope people check that out. But comics is not something I always wanted to do. Like I said, I came to it late in my 20s and just kind of was very much drawn to the medium, and it seemed to fit my writing style and my writing strengths really well, and so I kind of started reading and writing comics at the same time, and sort of took off very quickly from there.
Oh, cool! So, what was the original plan? Novels or TV?
Yeah, I mean, I was a prose writer for a while. I wrote screenplays when I was younger, but when I got into comics, I was working as a journalist. So honestly, I'd never completely fallen away from the idea of writing fiction and getting into that sort of writing as a full-time profession, but I had fallen away from it in large part. You know what I mean? Like I kind of settled into a life of working in journalism and working to build up that career, and comics sort of drew me back to my first love of fiction writing and kind of got its hooks in me. Right.
Cool. So at 28, what were some of the comics that were out at the time that drew you in?
Sure. The big one that got me started was Astonishing XMen.
Okay.
A guy I worked with knew that I was a Joss Whedon fan, and so he got me a copy of the first Astonishing XMen trade in our Christmas gift exchange at work, which was edited by Mike Martz. So I'm now working with that Aftershock. So that's a very cool, fun little full circle thing. So that first Whedon Cassaday arc, and then I went out, and I think the second arc had just come out then, so I got that one. I started buying that in single issues, and that was all I bought for a long time. And then I gradually started getting into other things, and it was fun. I kind of in just a couple of years went through the arc that a lot of people go through through ages 6 through 20, where they start out reading big two books,
right.
And they start getting more into indie and creator-owned works as they get into their teen years. I sort of just I went through that arc in a very compressed frame, just carrying through the history of comics over the last 20 years or so in a pretty intense way. So yeah, cool. It was fun. It was fun.
No, that's That's a cool story. So then I need to ask. So you're a journalist. You find comics in later in life. You fall in love with them. Like, how do you go about finding your first job or deciding what you want to write? Because I'm sure there's people that are 28 that maybe are working, for a newspaper or something and maybe love comics,
Yeah. I left journalism shortly after that, and I found a job working in economic development for my local government. I also went back to school around that time and got my master's in public administration right as I was starting to get into comics. Okay. So sort of pursuing two very diametrically opposed career paths at the same time.
Yes.
But I spent several years, not several years, but I spent a few years just writing comic scripts, which I know a lot of people are like, you got to get out there and get your first comic made, and because that'll really teach you how to blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And that's cool. That might work for some people, but for me, really, that sort of intense period of like studying comics and just writing them while not trying to get any of them produced was really helpful to me in terms of honing my craft. And then I discovered Comics Experience, which I'm sure JD has talked about quite a bit on here as well. And if not, JD, we'll talk later about how you can start plugging them more. I took the Intro to Writing class through Comics Experience, taught by Andy Schmidt. And in that, he has you write a 5-page script.
Okay.
So I did that, and most of what I've been writing up to that point have been longer stuff. And Andy talks about how a 5-pager is actually, like, in many ways harder than a longer work, because you have to do a lot of the same things you do in a longer work, just in a much more compressed frame. So, and I found that to be true, and I found it to be a big craft challenge. So after that class, I kept on writing a lot more 5-page comics. And I took several of them, and then finally, for the first time, went out and found artists to work with, and put out a book called Clockwork, which is a collection of 12 5-page stories, one of which was the one I'd written in class, and a bunch that were written subsequent to that. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm still a big part of Comics Experience. I'm actually on the staff there now, where I do some teaching assistance with Andy in the writing courses, and I'll be possibly teaching some courses next year. I don't know if I can talk about that yet, but I just did. So sorry, Andy, if you're listening, I'm not supposed to. But yeah, so I did Clockwork, and I sent that out to a lot of editors, and I just sort of like very slowly built my way up from there, where I started to get a few pitch opportunities, including the Turtle stuff and some pitch opportunities on G.I. Joe. I was also doing more creator-owned stuff at the same time. I followed up Clockwork with a one-shot called Orc Girl, and then I did a mini for Monkey Brain, and it came out in print through IDW called Strange Nation. I did a war comic called Tet, also through IDW, and then just recently I kickstarted a book called Past the Last Mountain. And all of these with incredible artistic collaborators as well. Louis Jason Gannon-Beck on Past the Last Mountain, Paul Tucker on Tet, and on Strange Nation I worked with Juan Romero. It was really like, the capsized version of it makes it sound like, I just started putting out comics and then my career took off. But really, it's been like a very long slog. I actually, in my Twitter bio, there's a line in there that I put in there as a joke back in I think the year 2012, where I call myself the breakout comics creator of 2019. And I thought that would be funny because, I figured I'd probably break out around 2015, 2016 at the latest. And then, that'd be a funny joke there about, me thinking it'd take that long. Every year that gets less funny. And it feels more arrogant that I thought I'll break out sooner. And now, as we're creeping up on 2018, I feel like 2018 is the year at which having a line that says breakout comics creator of 2019 just no longer comes off as a joke at all. You know what I mean? It just comes off as either arrogant or hopeful, depending on how you look at it. So, but anyway, yeah. So it's pretty much just been a very slow build since then. Like you said, I've worked a lot on the Turtle stuff. I've done some G.I. Joe. I have a Clue miniseries coming out through IDW right now. I've done a bit of work with Marvel. It's been a lot of fun. So yeah, I've been very lucky. I've had a really good career, but it's definitely, it continues to just be a very long process of just chipping away at it bit by bit.
Right. I'm kind of curious. Back in the days when you were, just writing scripts and not sending them out, were you having friends look at them and getting feedback on them?
Here's another plug opportunity, Paul. Go ahead.
Right. I was after I got into Comics Experience, because one of the things that the Comics Experience has a thing called the Creators Workshop, where you can put your scripts on there and get really great feedback from other people. So that was really helpful. Before that, honestly, I kind of wasn't. I was just doing them by myself and then printing them up and going over them with a red pen. I think my experience in journalism kind of helped in terms of just learning how to do things more concisely to identify structural issues. Because my journalism always had a very narrative bent to it. I tended to work in more long form,
right,
investigative and narrative pieces at places I worked. So. But yeah, then after Comics Experience, then that kind of did open up the world to me, where I had people like JD and a lot of other mutual friends of ours who were able to look at them, and that sort of advanced things tremendously, having other eyes on them. Yeah.
Right. So that was going to be, my next question then is how did you meet JD and you edited some of his work. I'm sorry for you that, but
I am too. He had to deal with me.
Yes.
Comics Experience Workshop. I think we were just. I think he just critiqued Delusion. I think we argued for a little bit, and then we actually, developed a mutual respect for each other. And Paul's insanely talented, and he's got one of the best hustle work ethics of anyone I've ever met in comics. This dude just works and works and works and hustles and gets people out there looking at his work, and he's awesome. And what made him a great editor, I think, and I think he undervalues how good of an editor he is he has an amazing eye for talent, which is you kind of see the artist he works with. Even going back to Clockwork, there's 12 different artists on that, and they're all awesome. And every work that Paul's done, there's just a great artist on board. I read this Monstro Mechanica, and I'm just blown away by the art on this. And the big lesson I've gotten is hire the Dutch. They are just fantastic. I cannot wait for people to read this book. I think it's your best one yet, Paul. That's that sincerely.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
From the bottom, man. It's I'm not just kissing your butt because you're my friend and you're on the show, but I absolutely love this book. I wouldn't shut up to my wife about it for the next 2 days. It was so good.
Thank you, man. That means a lot to me.
Well,
I was going to actually met Chris when I was working on G.I. Joe. He was hired by IDW to do the art on one of my G.I. Joe shorts. And I did a G.I. Joe mini that was sort of structured in a way that it told several short stories about Cobra commanders throughout history within the framework of a larger story connecting all of these shorts. And Chris was one of the guys who did one of those. So, and yeah, I really loved his work. He has this incredible clean line style that you don't see a lot here in America. He's worked a lot in European comics, and over here he's done some G.I. Joe stuff. He's done some stuff I think for Magic the Gathering, and most recently he did a run on the Winona Earp comic that he did a really awesome job on. So, but yeah, I can't wait for people to see what he can do, because I think his work is just absolutely stunning. Just an amazing style, a very unique style, and also just really good storytelling that just brings so much richness and depth to every panel. It's great, and Sean's colors are just drop dead gorgeous. I feel like the colors convey every possible emotion, every emotion that the story needs, while also not feeling not being super impressionistic colors all the time, like a lot of comics like these, which I like that style, but I'm saying it's not that. It's a really good balance between something that kind of anchors the story in reality, which I think the nature of the story kind of needs, while also really bringing home the emotional content of it. And just they're very bright. I feel like her color palette combined with Chris's clean line work just gives the book a real pop feel, real pop culture feel to it that I really dig. I like this book. I'm sorry.
So on the subject of the book, then,
Yes.
For the listeners, what is the elevator pitch?
I guess we should talk about that. At its heart, it's the story of a girl and her robot. It takes place in the Renaissance, and it's a book that stars Leonardo da Vinci, his female apprentice, and their robot bodyguard. And Leonardo is, in our story, kind of being pulled between different factions in terms of his technology and his war machines.
Mm-hmm.
And Isabel, his apprentice, basically takes it upon herself to try to get their 9-foot-tall robot, which Leonardo intends to be just a tool, and she tries to essentially bring it into some semblance of sentience in order to use it as a weapon to either save Leonardo from these warring factions that are trying to control him, or possibly save them from him, because she recognizes that he's an incredibly dangerous man in his own right. And so the short elevator pitch that I like to use is, I like to say that it's a swashbuckling story that's also a meditation on identity. I feel like it's a story that has like this really big, boisterous, adventurous sci-fi elements,
mm-hmm.
while also being in other ways simultaneously a very quiet story about race, about gender, about our role in society. It has something for literally everyone.
And here's what I like about the stuff that Paul does, is that if you boil it down to a simple elevator pitch, like, it sounds like this really cool hook. Like, yeah, it's Da Vinci and a robot. You know, you say that, you're like, oh, I'm curious, I'm in right away. And then Paul goes so much deeper into, and what I like my favorite part about the first issue that I read is how we kind of get into the political intrigue of the era. So you've literally got the Medicis and the issues with the papacy and this like internal war brewing between them, and Da Vinci kind of caught in the middle of it. And I like that you've incorporated real history. I don't know how much license you play with it as the story goes on, but I like that it felt like the real Florence of the 14th century. Like, it felt real. Like, I dug that so much about it.
Well, we tried to do, we take like wild liberties with history, in terms of, obviously, like, you know, there's a 9-foot-tall sentient robot in the story. So, you know, so the sci-fi elements are clearly very ahistorical. And we also, we take great liberties with, the people and like the timelines. Like the Da Vinci in our story is actually 20 years older than he was in real life when these particular events are taking place. But like, when you set aside all of that stuff, like you said, the city itself and the conflicts between the different factions, we did try to make it very realistic and make it very true to life. Chris and I both did a ton of research on Florence at the time. So a lot of the story is drawn from history, and even like we tried to get the detail work right. Like, you know, just little things like how many wild animals there were roaming around. Like at Florence at the time, you would just find like, you know, pigs and goats and just massive amount of cats just chilling out everywhere. And so Chris incorporated that into the art. So just, you know, everything from like, we tried to keep the big historical conflicts accurate while also, you know, keeping the feel of life at the time accurate as well.
Cool. So is that a time in history that already appealed to you when, or did you just think that was a great time for telling the story you wanted to tell?
I'm a pretty big fan of history, and I think that sort of tends to be reflected in my work. I don't think that like the Renaissance was a time that had any like particular appeal to me greater than a lot of other places, but it is, you know, obviously a very rich and very interesting time. And so the seed of the story was just, you know, me reading about how Da Vinci had this automaton, which was basically just like it was shaped like a knight, and, you know, it could do basic movements. And of course, me being the kind of robot-loving person I am, I thought, you know, okay, but wouldn't it be cool if that was like a real functioning sentient robot, like something out of sci-fi? So basically, like take 50s sci-fi and like drop it down into the Renaissance. And obviously, the story grew quite a bit from there, but that was sort of the seed of it. Yeah.
Cool. And this book is independently published?
No, it's coming out through Aftershock.
Oh, okay, okay. You did say that, yes.
Yeah, who have done a lot of the great stuff, and they've been really, really fantastic to work with. But it is coming out through comic shops, so you should let your comic shop know if you want to order it. FLC final order cutoff is November 20th. So, and if you go on my Twitter profile, which is just at Paul Allor. My pinned tweet is an order form, which even if you don't use the order form, it still has all the info you need in terms of the order codes and the 2 different covers and everything you would need to let your shop know to order it for you.
Right. Cool. No, yeah, definitely. We've said this before on the show quite a few times. Like, yeah, if you can get your shop to order these books, it's the best thing you can do, because it shows not only support for your work, but it also shows I think it shows the big two that we're tired of them at times,
Yeah.
And we're looking for better stories and better alternatives, and this is definitely one of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, if any Big Two editors are listening, I just want to say that was not me saying that. I love the Big Two. I'm not tired of you guys at all, and you know how to find me if you ever need me. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, I do think that the comics industry needs a lot more variety in the types of stories that we're telling. It needs a lot more voices, and
right.
I certainly am not going to be arrogant enough to be like, my book helps push comics forward in that way. But I think every creator-owned book is a little piece of that mosaic.
Right. I mean, I guess I kind of miss the idea of like, I mean, it's always been superhero stories, but in the early days, the ideas of like the Amazing Fantasy book was to be able to tell a different story every month,
Yeah.
And if one did well, then it became a title, like, the great example being Spider-Man. But this is a story that could probably be told in something like Amazing Fantasy without having to worry about affecting, this month's Spider-Man or Batman.
Yeah. It is nice to have a self-contained story, and I do think, and JD, since you're a little more outside of it, maybe you can speak to this more than I could, but I do think that this book has a lot of elements that will appeal to people who enjoy superhero stories. It's definitely not a superhero story, but it has like a lot of the same elements of the swashbuckling adventure and the larger than life characters and all of that, and sort of.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's like what everyone with the superhero thing. The thing that appeals to superhero fans is high concept stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's what draws a lot of people in. Is you have that really kick-ass high concept. People go, oh, okay, I'm interested. And what I like and I think this one has got a really, really good high concept. Like I think you could sell this to a person. Everybody knows Da Vinci. Everybody knows what a robot is, and you start talking about mixing those two together. And now you've got something. And now when you get them in the door, now you get them with a really good story. And now you get them with characters, which the characters really come to life off the page. Like they're like this particular version of Da Vinci is dangerous, and I really like that about him. Like there's this real element of like I expected him to kind of drive the story a little bit. And what you did with him surprised me a little. And I like that about it. I dug that. And so and the characters in there, they're intriguing. And I think that if you do like superhero stories, this will fit into what you dig. Like, it works in that regard. So I think that, it totally fits into one of those things,
Cool.
All right. So not to take away from Paul at all, but we do have a new feature that we're starting this week, and it's for our fans, but we're going to discuss it. So it's, we're going to start doing polls on Twitter on Sunday and discuss the results when we record. And this is a good question that we can discuss. Which of these movies are you looking most forward to this holiday season? And of course, the choices were Thor Ragnarok, Justice League, or Star Wars: The Last Jedi. And then I gave a fourth choice of I Can't Choose. And before I reveal the results, which of the movies are you guys looking most forward to?
I'll let our guest go first, Paul.
Could you repeat the beginning? I think I might have missed one of them.
Thor Ragnarok, Justice League, or Star Wars: The Last Jedi.
Okay, no, I didn't miss any. Definitely Thor Ragnarok. Based mainly on the fact that there's maybe a lot of those Planet Hulk elements to it, and Planet Hulk was another one that I read pretty early on in my comics reading and had a big impact on me. Mm-hmm. And also because of, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Taiki Waititi, the director. I loved What We Do in the Shadows movie that he did. I haven't seen The Hunt for the Wilder People, but I really love what I've seen of his previous work, and just everything I've heard him say about it is really fantastic. And it's also, it's frankly great to see between this and Black Panther coming up early next year. It's great to see people of color directing more of the big two movies. I think that's something we definitely need to see a lot more of.
Right. No, I definitely agree with that. That we need more diversity, I think. So what about you, JD?
I agree with everything Paul said. I mean, it looks great. It looks like a ton of fun. It's had one of the best marketing campaigns I've ever seen. Like these trailers just are coming to life, and they're so awesome. But I got to say that I'm looking more forward to Last Jedi, mainly because the last trailer threw me to the point where I thought that I really don't know what I'm going to see. And I feel like I know what I'm getting with Thor, and I'm excited by it, and I really want to see it. But I don't really I don't know. The last Jedi trailer made me go, man, I really don't know what this is about as much as I thought I did. I'm really curious. So I'm a Jedi guy.
Right. So, I think we talked about this in the show, or this was on that recording we lost.
The lost episode.
Yes, the lost episode. I've been a Star Wars fan since I was like 5 years old. And Luke has always been my favorite character, so that the fact that he's the main character of the next movie, it definitely has me excited for it. Though I do think this Ragnarok looks like the best one yet of all the Thor movies. So yeah, but I'm going to go with Star Wars, and it looks like our audience is going with Star Wars too. So I was kind of shocked. Justice League and Ragnarok are dead heat at 18%, and Star Wars had 54% of the vote.
Wow!
And fake news.
I Can't Choose only got 9%. So
that shocks me that people that the people who took this poll are as excited for Justice League as they are for Thor. Thor just no comment.
Yeah. So
Paul, you got Monstro Mechanica coming up. What else you got working on? What's kind of else is in the fire for you at the moment?
Sure. Like I said, I have another Turtles issue coming out in January. It's Ninja Turtles Universe number, I believe, 18. And that's with artist Tyler Boss, who a lot of folks may know from Four Kids Walk Into a Bank, his Black Mask book with Matthew Rosenberg. So I think that is going to be a lot of fun. It's probably the broadest comedy that I've written in a Turtles book, and I think Tyler's just absolutely killing it. So I think that's going to be a really fun issue. That's all that's been announced so far. So I have some other things in development or coming down the pike, but those are the only things I can speak to so far.
Can you talk about Universe a little bit? I know they kind of, like in the Universe book, they kind of delve into some of the different stuff in the TMNT world. Is there anyone going to be showing up new or different?
No, this issue is going to be about the Turtles. It's kind of funny because I did the first Turtles, or the first Universe arc, like the first 4 issues, and it was a Turtles-centric one. And then I think since then, Universe has mostly dwelled on other characters, and now this issue is kind of bringing it back to the Turtles again, which it's fun for me because previous Universe, like I'd done a few things with the Turtles, did a couple issues of Turtles in Time and a few other things, but most of my previous Turtles work had been like with a lot of the side characters. Like I did a mini-series about Krang's rise to power. I did a mini-series about the Mechanicals. I did one-shots about Fugitoid and Shredder. So it's been fun this last year to be able to write the Turtles proper a lot more and have fun with those guys after kind of cutting my teeth on a lot of the other characters in the universe.
Now you said this new arc is going to kind of be more comedy. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just a one-shot, so it's just the one shot.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's very comedic. Yeah, hopefully.
What are the challenges? Because I've never done any comedy stuff, and it terrifies me the thought of it. Like,
yeah, me too.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what's the headspace for getting into comedy? Like, it's easy to be a smartass and make quips when people say things, but I think writing and constructing comedy is so much more difficult. Like, how do you get yourself into that headspace to do that?
Yeah, it's weird because I never think of myself as being good at comedy, but at this point I've actually done like a fair amount of it. Like Clue is also a fairly comedic book. I did a G.I. Joe one shot with Corey Lewis a while back that was very broadly comedic, and now I have this one. But every time I do comedy, really like every time I do anything these days, I try to do something different with it, try to set a new challenge for myself. And so the challenge with this one was to do something that was very broadly physically comedic, very like sort of slapstick, and sort of harken back to sort of the old comedy series of yesterday. So it is a little tricky for me to get into that headspace, and I think I do just kind of have to sort of like, I treat it in a way like I treat everything else, in terms of like I think about the characters and I think about their conflicts, and I just think about ways to show their character development and show their conflicts in a way that comes out as funny rather than, more dramatic or more horrific or more whatever else. But yeah, I do also sort of like on this one, I read a lot of the old Popeye stuff. I read a lot of like Little Lulu, just a lot of really old comedy stuff, and to try to sort of absorb the rhythms of it, the pacing. I think in comics, like a big part of comedy, especially physical comedy, really is just the pacing, which is nice because that's, obviously you can include a lot of that in your script, but it also depends upon having the right artist. So that was why, like when the editor and I were first talking about this, I brought up Tyler's name as someone that I thought would be great for it. And when I found out that he, that they had asked him and he had agreed to come on board, I was like, yeah. So I was able to basically write the entire thing very much tailored toward his style, and to try to, give him a chance to do his thing and sort of let me sort of step back a little bit.
Yeah, and I was actually just thinking that too, that when it comes to a lot of comedy, you always hear the key is timing. So a lot of that does fall to the artist and making sure that comes across in the panels. Is there a lot of, when you're doing comedy, is there a lot of back and forth? Like does the artist give you an idea of here's how I think it should look, and then you guys work out? Like, does that work, timing wise, or?
I mean, Tyler went over the layouts, obviously, and I think in this case, because I was fairly familiar with his style and I was able to write it very specifically for that, it actually came together pretty smoothly. So, okay. Yeah.
Cool.
There wasn't as much back and forth, I think, as you would need if we were like had to fill each other's styles out a little bit more, so to speak.
Right.
So, like we're talking about comedies, and like I said before, the thought of writing comedy terrifies me. What has been, of the books we've written and worked on so far, what has been the biggest challenge to you personally? Like, is it something more creator-owned where you're digging to find something, or is it writing to licensed properties and trying to get your head around characters that you don't own and you didn't create? What's been the biggest challenge for you, bouncing back and forth between those two worlds?
I think everything tends to be pretty challenging because, like I said, I sort of put that on myself. You know what I mean? That I always try to push myself. I always try to do something new to the point where, a lot of times when I'm in the thick of it, I am like, all right, next time I'm going to do something that I know I can do, that I know is really safe, that I don't have to push myself as much on, but then next time I always push myself anyway. One big one was Clue, that's coming out right now. Like I said, I don't know when this is going to launch, but Clue issue number 5 comes out this Wednesday, November 1st. And then I think number 6 comes out later this November. So it's almost wrapped up, but it was a really tough one just in terms of like having to have the entire structure in place very early on, in order to have everything set up and pay off well, sort of balancing like having some sort of mystery structure to it while also making it a fairly comedic story as well. So just the structure of doing a mystery and a comedy both at once was very tricky to me. And then also there were some curveballs in process, as there often are, where we needed to change a few things pretty late in the process of doing it, in ways that sort of had us sort of have to retrench and figure it out again on the fly. So, and also Clue has an ending that's very weird structurally, and that I think if we pulled it off right, has to be like both wildly unexpected, while at the same time you can look back at it and go, okay, yeah, I can see how they were building to this thing that I didn't see coming at all. And that was a bit tricky as well.
I remember you told me you were going to write this book, and I remember thinking to myself, how the hell is he going to write a book based on a board game? Like and it's been really well done. So I mean, that's a kudos to you, man. That's really good. Like, what I don't think a lot of people realize is when you're doing these licensed books, like there's another, like not only do you have to go through the editorial layer, but then you got to work with a licensor and make sure that they're all cool with what. I don't know if people realize that there's so many different levels in writing for these things and the challenge that goes along with it. I mean, like, I think that's talent itself just to be able to serve so many masters in that. Like, that's impressive.
It is, though I will say that, like, despite what I just said, like, Hasbro really has been incredibly supportive in terms of letting us do, like, some really weird stuff with this, beloved 60-year-old property of theirs. And, has really kind of given us an incredibly wide range to do our thing and go kind of nuts with it in a way that, honestly, like when I initially turned in my pitch for it, I kind of made the decision and I'm like, I'm not going to try to like hold back and try to do what I think they want. I'm just going to go crazy and see what they say. And what they said was, hey, this is cool. Let's do it. So yeah.
Cool. So, as a writer, who are some of your biggest influences?
Whenever you ask that question, my brain just like instantly flushes out. Ann Patchett is a really big one. I really love her work. Graham Greene, I think it's had a pretty big. It's tough. Like I'm literally just like naming people that I can think of, like who have done things that are really responded to well. But it's such a complex mosaic. I think I've used the word mosaic like 3 times in this podcast interview. Paul's word of the day. It's on my calendar here. But no, I think that I have so much influence from so many different people. I will say that like there are a lot of comics writers I really love, and a lot of them have been big influences on, like Garth Ennis. I would say someone who's definitely been a really big influence, but I do tend to be more influenced by writers in other mediums, and poets and historians, and God, if you're writing comics and you're not reading poetry, I don't know, man, because the rhythm and the conciseness of poetry can teach you so much that you can bring to the comics game. So I don't know, like I don't want to sound all artsy fartsy, but that's a tough question for me to answer, and it's really not, like the typical canned answer. I really like Warren Ellis and Matt Fraction, and I try to imitate those two guys as closely as possible. Don't do that. Too many comics writers. You can tell who the 2 or 3 guys, there's always guys, who influence them are, and how much they're trying to just do a copy of those guys. Like, be your own precious little butterfly. You know what I mean? Do your own thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, that's fair. I'm sure JD was hoping you were going to say him, but.
No, I'm sitting here going, no wonder I haven't gotten anything. I don't read poetry. Now I got to catch up.
That was a really pretentious little soapbox. I was just up on there, so I'm putting the soapbox away now. Sorry about that, guys.
So you said earlier that you were the breakout artist of 2019, but breakout comic book writer of 2019.
Yeah.
What do you consider is necessary to be the breakout artist or breakout writer?
That's a tough one. I mean, yeah.
Is it is it just pure popularity? You write the book that sells, 250,000 copies, or is it you win an Eisner Award, or?
No, it's none of that stuff. I think it's more just having the ability to more or less do the projects you want to do. Like, I don't know, I think I would have to be in a place where I get pitches picked up a lot more easily than I do before that. That's, honestly, that question cuts pretty deep into like a lot of my own personal insecurities and my own thoughts on my career. So I'd rather skip that one if that's okay.
Okay. That's
Sorry,
fine.
I'm going to cop out on that question.
So I'm going to tell you something, is that, like, I told the guys, we have a guy who's not on the show but does our reviews and stuff for him, Matt Vrill, super awesome dude. I told him you were going to be on the show last week, and he totally geeked out. He's like, I love his stuff. He's great. So, I mean, like.
That's crazy.
You know, I mean, like, I got a chuckle out of it because I've known you for a long time, and I'm like, that's so cool that my friend has fans. And I don't think you're my buddy, so I just think about you like that. And, like, you know, you've done some – and it's one thing to hear your friends saying, hey, you do good work, you do good work, you do good work. But, I mean, it's another thing when you actually have people you don't know who say, hey, man, this is actually really good work. Yeah. So, I mean, I get where you're coming from on that, man. And it's such a subjective thing of what is success, you know, what is I. But, I mean, it is now my turn to be the outsider looking in. Is, man, you do great stuff, and everything you write is good. You know, there's not one time I'm like, man, Paul just missed me on this one. Like, I dig it all, and it's great. And, like, you are getting stuff, and it's fun. It's been fun for me as your friend to see you have success.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And, like, yeah, and another reason that's a tough question to answer is because I recognize that I have been incredibly lucky. I've had a lot of great opportunities, and I have a career that a lot of people would really want to have. Mm-hmm. At the same time, because I'm a human and I'm a creative person, I still have that inner gnawing that it's not good enough for me personally, that I still want more. But I feel like, you know, going out there and being like, I don't feel like I'm broken in yet, here's what would do that for me, is kind of a shitty thing to do.
No.
When I don't also acknowledge where I'm at, and that I'm very blessed to be where I'm at. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what makes the great ones great. You know, here's this Johnny Sports guy coming through. It's that inner desire to be the best and to want to be great that fuels you. And the day you look back and you say, "Man, I'm great, I'm done," is the day you should be done. You know, when you lose that competitive fire, when you lose that desire to go out and push and fight hard to get what you want. You know, there's no point anymore. So at no point I think anybody should ever be like, "Yeah, man, I'm happy, I'm content." That just means you lost your edge.
I do think you have to balance that against, like, not letting that make you, like, such a miserable person that you end up like Michael Jordan, like, you know, being, you know, literally the pinnacle of your sport and still, like, complaining about people that wronged you when you were in middle school. You know what I mean? Like basically, it's a thin line of, like, still having that urging while not letting it make you just a miserable person.
Right.
To be around. So
there's got to be a happy medium, and I think that's a perfect example of a guy who definitely let his competitive fires drive him a little too much.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
Yeah.
So, is there, you know, you made sure to let the big two know that you love them. Is there any character or any book from the big two that you would want to work on?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't like getting into specifics on that because, you know, like, I don't know.
You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah, it feels a little weird. I will say that I did a Namor and Invaders story,
right,
for Secret Empire.
Oh, cool! You're right.
Yeah, and that was a pretty big dream one. Like, the Invaders are a big freaking deal to me. So, although I don't, at the same time, like, there aren't any of these characters that I've, like, you know, been reading since I was 6. So I don't have that thing that a lot of comics writers have, where it's like, you know, I don't have, like, that childhood attachment to any of these characters in particular, like a lot of people have, but I still, like, I love them as an adult, and there's a lot of them that I really like to write, but I think that gives me a little bit greater flexibility of being able to just, like, but this way, I don't think there's a big two character that I wouldn't want to dive in and do something with, because by virtue of the fact that they have survived in a fairly competitive big two marketplace, most of the guys and women that they're still doing books about are pretty frickin' interesting characters.
Right. Okay. Cool.
I think that gives Paul a big advantage, is that like when he comes at these characters, he comes at them from a more of a fresh perspective than someone who has, you know, decades of baggage. And I think it keeps more of a professional outlook toward things, because you might not, when you're working with an editorial team, you might not be able to do everything you've been dreaming about doing with Batman since you were 7 years old. You know? And when you can attack it from a professional perspective, I think it's a lot easier to go, all right.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I totally agree. You know, because you might get to work on Batman and you want to finally have Robin and Batman confess their gay love for each other, and the editorial staff probably won't let that fly. So.
Sure.
That took a weird left turn.
That did take a weird left turn.
That's what Kevin Smith always says if he got to write the main Batman book. That's probably what he would do.
Very edgy, Kevin.
Cool. All right. So, unfortunately, we're going to cut it a little short tonight because I do have an obligation to get to. But a question that we normally answer on, and I'm not sure if you're going to want to answer this or not. But I think
a jerk about answering most of the questions so far. So.
but JD knows where I'm going with this. And the question we normally answer on is, how do you measure success?
Boy, being happy with your work once it's at a distance, because like I don't think I'm someone who's ever going to like finish a script and be like, that's an amazing script. But if I can get to the point where like after I've had a little distance from my work, if I go back and like I look at it like a year later and I go, yeah, this came out okay. I'm happy with this.
Yeah,
I would call that success.
Oh no, that's a brilliant answer. I think that's any creative person feels that way. You know, like
I've got this pinned tweet on my Twitter. It's a quote from Bryan Cranston. That's the act of creating in itself is the reward, because anything else is out of your control. And I think that's a really good attitude to have. I think Paul expressed something similar in his words, and I think that's a really smart way to look at it.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I can't tell you, being in different bands and stuff and like written different songs and, you know, when you're working on it, you keep wanting, oh, let's do this. Let's tweak this. Oh, let's change this. Oh, let's go here, you know, and then, but like if you can go back to it a year later and go, you know what, that's a cool song. That's a win.
Yeah.
Cool. So, where are the best places for people to find you online?
Mostly Twitter. It's at Paul Allor. It's ALLOR, like all or nothing. I'm on Facebook, but I don't use it a ton. I think you can just search for me on there. I have a website that I promise I'm gonna start updating again sometime soon. But yeah, those are probably some of the main places.
And when's the book out again?
The book is out in December. I want to say December 13th. I should have had that in front of me. And I believe final order cutoff is November 20th. And again, like the pinned tweet on my Twitter will tell you everything you know.
Cool. So one more time, for people that don't really get the way that comics work, especially in like the non-big two section, is the orders are super, super important to making sure that these things get out there. It's not enough to just discover these things on the rack. Go out of your way. Go up to your LCS and say, hey, man, I really want to read this book. Like, order one, get it in your pull list. Trust me, I've read it. You're not going to regret it. It is that good.
And a big part of what that does as well is that if enough people are going up to their shop owner and saying, hey, I want to pre-order this book, he not only pre-orders it from you, but he goes, oh, there's enough demand for this book. There's probably other people who want to read it who aren't pre-ordering it. I'll bump up my order even a little more. So you really do have a ripple effect that is very strong.
Right. Cool. All right. So again, you know, we're close to an hour, but we'll definitely have you back on again, I think, to make up for it. And
cool. See you tomorrow night.
Cool. And as always, boys and girls, thanks for listening. And don't let your cape be caught in the door. Have a good one.